welcome to Build. I'm your host, Ricky Camilleri. Our next film, One Last Thing, tells the story of an estranged father in search of a relationship with the daughter he left behind many years ago. It stars the incredible Wendell Pierce. Let's take a quick look at the trailer before we talk to the film's director, Tim Rouhana.
Hey, Lucy, I'm your father. No, you can't just blurt it out like that. Who are you? Darth Vader? I have a daughter.
I'm sorry?
I hired an investigator. I told him there might be a child. I didn't really know. Hi. This might come as a shock.
I haven't seen you over there checking me out. Get the hell away from me.
Wait. I'm your father. So?
So, did you really look for me?
I've been looking for you for 25 years.
Look, you're playing catch-up in the dad department.
Yeah.
You know, Jamie likes you.
No, she doesn't. Lucy? Whoa, Lucy! I've been learning about your condition.
Oh, my condition, huh?
Lucy is important to me. I want her in my life a long time.
You just met her.
You found out you were gonna die. Is there like a last thing that you want to do?
I was afraid this might get morbid.
Everybody, please welcome director of One Last Thing, Tim Rouhana. Let's hear it.
Hey, everybody. Hey, Ricky. Thanks for having me.
And I think if we're all good, we might be joined in a little while by Wendell Pierce.
That is the plan.
Yeah. Let's talk about what the movie's about and making it. But first, let's talk about Wendell before he gets here. What an no. What was it like to have to find out that you cast Wendell Pierce in this role? Because as soon as you start watching the film, it's one of those sort of pure moments where it's like, oh, nobody else could play this part. This is a perfect part for this actor that we've never gotten the chance to see him play.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, a short version, to cast Wendell Pierce in your film is dream come true. I mean, that's just the bottom line. And this is a guy who we all know from shows like The Wire, Treme, Confirmation. He's on Suits. I mean, the list is long. And he has just such incredible talent and such incredible empathy that he can bring to characters. And a character like Dylan really needs that because so much of what's happening with him is internal. A lot of his life at the beginning of the film is very alone. And so having an actor who can communicate those things without dialogue is incredibly important.
Yeah, communicate a kind of loneliness, but without sort of overdoing it and looking sad, because he doesn't look too sad at the beginning of the film. He's just a guy who's alone and has this thing that he's not desperately searching for. He put out a feeler and it has come back. Yeah,
he's kind of gotten into a routine as a person, as we all sort of do. And in his case, he's a dentist who lives in Florida and plays golf, and that's basically his everyday routine. He has people in his life, but he's a little bit detached from them. He's probably mildly depressed. But he's going through the functioning of his day-to-day life. And many, many years before, he had found out that his girlfriend at the time was pregnant. And through a series of events, which are sort of backstoried into the film, he doesn't know whether or not this child has been born. He loses track of the mother and the child, and he's hired a private investigator to try to find out what happened. But over these 25 years, I think it's fair to say that his drive for that an investigation or for that discovery has waned a little bit. You know, after 25 years, you know, not to give up necessarily, but like how much more can you do? And so he's sort of let it rest on what the private investigator has been doing. And at the beginning of the film, the private investigator shows up and says, "I found her," and that sort of sets us off onto this journey.
Where did this idea come from?
It's not autobiographical.
Okay.
At least to my knowledge. No, it actually, the central theme of the film to me is sort of a question of what is family? What does it mean to be family? We have, you know, people who were born into our family, or we're born into a family, and then we have people that we accumulate, for lack of a better word, as you go through life, friends who become like family. And so you have this idea of choice versus obligation. And that central theme came to me actually out of the breakup of a romantic relationship, where we were together for a number of years. We weren't married, we didn't have any kids, but when it ended, it was a bit of a surprise to me. And one of the parts of my process and sort of understanding what happened was to sort of think about, what does it mean to be family with someone, and what choices do you have, and what can you do, and that sort of was the groundwork for everything that came afterwards. I didn't want to tell that story though as a relationship movie. I felt like it had been done to some extent. I felt like it had been done by better filmmakers than me.
You take those feelings that you're having and put them into a story that's like maybe a little more off the beaten path.
Exactly. I mean, there's a lot of universal ideas to that. I mean, there's only one family relationship, right? I mean, we've all got families, and everyone in this room has a different relationship with all of the people in their family, even if it's my brother to my brother or your sister to yours. I mean, it's always going to be different, but we all share a commonality in that. And so I didn't think there was much of an issue in translating that into a different dynamic of relationship. And then there's a bunch of challenges that they encounter as they try to build this family dynamic, this father-daughter relationship that came from other stories I was working on that just sort of fit together nicely to challenge these characters in a way that made them make decisions that fit with that theme.
Is that fun when that happens? Oh, I'll take that and I'll put it in this thing. I can finally use that somewhere.
It is. It's great. It's one of the most, the building of the initial story is one of the most fun parts of being a writer, because you get to work solely from in this case, you get to work solely from imagination, and you can do anything you want. You have a blank canvas. And as you start to pull other pieces and put them together, and when you see them actually fit and start to propel the story forward to where you want to try to go, you start to get energized in a way that really carries you through.
It also allows you to let go of a lot of other these stories that you were working on that you hadn't found a place, and maybe you were trying to build them individually, and now it's like, oh, I can take that and put it in this, and take that and put it in this, and I don't have to worry about building that separate.
I can
thing
stop
anymore.
thinking about this scene, and I can finally use it somewhere, or this element or theme. It's like a happy accident. And I think in filmmaking, whether it's in the writing process or in the shooting process or even in the editing process, those happy accidents are often the best moments. Certainly as a filmmaker, you feel like, oh, maybe I know what I'm doing, or maybe at least it's working. And so to have that happen early in the writing process and feel like there was a solidity and fluidity to the script where there's no real extraneous details. Things that you learn early on do come back and are important later, even though they might be sort of minute details. Nothing is really highlighted in that way, but it kind of gives you a feeling of a completeness to the story.
Now, Wendell and Journey, obviously, like when the film begins, they have never met. Mm-hmm. So did you want to sort of establish it that way while you were shooting, or did they meet beforehand and talk or get to know each other?
They didn't really know each other much beforehand, so that was, it was good. As I'm sure you guys know, you don't usually shoot films sequentially. So, keeping the people apart for the sake of that first time meeting awkwardness sometimes works, sometimes doesn't. It depends on your schedule.
You might not be shooting that first.
We might shoot
first. You might
in
be
fact, the final scene of the movie is a scene we shot on, I think, day 2 or 3. And it's sort of after all this stuff that they'd gone through.
God, that's hard.
It is and it isn't. It gives you a sense of where you're trying to go as a team of filmmakers. So there's, everyone's read the script, but when you actually see it, it takes on a sort of different life. And so knowing what that looks like and where you're trying to get to emotionally and thematically, I think is good. But to answer your question, they didn't know each other that well to begin with, so that was nice. So they got to know each other as the characters got to know each other. And we tried to plan the schedule in such a way that it didn't jump too far around.
Was that difficult?
Surprisingly, it wasn't as difficult as you might think, considering that there's a number of sort of like twists along the way, I would say. Mm-hmm. But we were able to sort of keep everything relatively emotionally contained. So, they meet in the film early on in the shooting process, but those scenes, they meet in the film early on in the sequence of the film, but we actually didn't shoot those scenes until the end. So there was an interesting dichotomy between their relationship after 20 some odd days of shooting and the fact that it's like, hey, how are you? I'm your father. Right. But, the truth is they're professionals. These are incredibly talented actors. This is what they do. And the three of them give tremendous performances in the film. And so it was never really a concern in that way.
Right. When you cast Wendell, or how did you know? Did you write this for Wendell, or think of Wendell when you were writing it?
No, I didn't. I don't like to write with an idea in mind, and I didn't have a particular set of characteristics for the character. It was really just the sort of facts of his life on the paper. My producers, Brendan Mason and Alexa Fogel. Alexa is a very well-known casting director. Among many things that she's cast were The Wire. She's known Wendell for many, many years. And when I brought them the script...
I imagine she probably had cast Wendell in something before The Wire, too. The Wire, to me, always felt like a show that was cast by somebody who had worked with these people on different things prior to it.
Well, I mean, I don't know the exact amount of time, but Wendell went to Juilliard. He'd been in the business for a long time before The Wire, but The Wire is sort of the thing that catapulted him into sort of the consciousness, and obviously we all probably know him from that. But Alexa, being a casting director and being an incredible casting director, has known him and thousands of other actors. That's her job, and she's great at it, and she loves it. It's to go out and find people that we don't know who can embody these characters. And so when she read the script initially, she was like, Wendell? And I was like, yeah, Wendell. And it's sort of, once you have that piece set, you go from there. And Alexa...
How did you know that he would work so well for this, considering I think what he's most known for is a kind of tough detective?
Well, I'm going to let him tell this story, hopefully, when he gets here. But there's a role in the film of a detective, the investigator who ultimately finds his daughter. And initially, when Alexa sent Wendell the script to say, take a look at this, he thought that was the role that she was sending him. Because, as you point out, he had never really been given the opportunity to play this kind of a character in a lead situation. How did I know? I mean, first and foremost, I trust Alexa implicitly, and she is brilliant at what she does. But also, I've seen Wendell's work, and I was an actor before I ended up behind the camera, so I have an understanding of what it's like to be cast in a certain...
Presence is presence.
Presence is
also,
presence,
well.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, he is an immensely talented actor. Just because we haven't seen him do certain things on camera, it never occurred to me that he wouldn't be capable of doing it.
So often when it comes to when we talk about talent with actors, and there's different kinds of talent, there's knowing the craft, but then there's also just presence.
Absolutely.
And having a face and having a presence that is empathetic. And I think Wendell Pierce, whether he's like a tough detective or not, he is extremely watchable and very empathetic and relatable.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a humanity there that comes through in all of his performances, and that's an important thing in any performance, even if you're playing the hard-nosed detective, or even if you're, or if you're playing the father discovering a lost daughter. And I think, in my opinion, I think it's one of the great things about acting is and filmmaking is you can take a picture of that. There's some innate quality to some people at varying degrees of level, but you can take a picture of it. You can take a picture of chemistry. You can take a picture of a person's empathy. And Wendell, as you point out, is one of those people who you can really experience what's happening in a moment through his being. And then on top of that, you have his craft and his talent.
I really liked watching him play extremely normal, like normal to the point where it's almost like hurting him at times. I thought that was like a very big departure for him, which was enjoyable to watch.
Yeah, it's a nice thing about the role, and I think the film in general is it exists on a very normal plane in terms of what it's saying about life and how it's presenting life. There's a little bit of funny. There's a little bit of intentional tugging at your heartstrings, but it's really just telling a story about a guy who's in a particular place in his life, and this big news comes to him, and we sort of take a trip with him and see what that looks like. And along the way, we meet these incredible characters. We meet his daughter Lucy, who is a person who's been orphaned basically since she was 15. Her mother had passed away. She'd been in foster care, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, in her mid-20s, this guy shows up and says, "Hey, I'm your father." And so we get to see a little bit of what that would do to a person, and how you sort of process that when this guy shows up and says, "I want to be a part of your life."
What was the toughest part about making the film?
Oh, the toughest part about making the film. I'm sure I'm not the first filmmaker to say this, but you always want a little bit more time.
Of course.
But we were incredibly lucky. We had an awesome cast. We had an awesome crew. We shot in Atlanta and here in Brooklyn. Both places, everybody was great. It was, aside from just being professional and talented, there was like a really good feeling on the set around the film. So a lot of the trouble that you sometimes have on film sets, we didn't have any of that. So that was great. And so it almost feels like a cop out to say it, but just a little bit more time just to get a couple of different things or work a couple of different things. Sometimes that pressure makes for great moments, and other times you're just like, oh, I wish I had a little more time to do that or do this. And
You find like the kind of thing where you ran out of time in a day to get a shot sort of thing, or?
No, we did I think we did a fairly good job of staying on schedule, which you kind of have to do when you're working sort of at lower budgets and you're limited in terms of your locations and things like that. But that did happen occasionally, but more it was just knowing we have to be on schedule. It's you really, as a director, you have to manage your days and you have to get your pages. And so the first thing is I have to get some shot of this. And luckily I have incredible talent in front of the camera who are prepared and make my life so much easier. And as long as I don't mess it up, we're probably okay. The crew is ready to go, the cast is ready to go, and so you're able to get a lot of stuff. But you're moving at a pretty good clip when you're trying to shoot. We shot, I think, 24 days over the course of 4 or 5 weeks.
Was there a scene that made you the most nervous to shoot?
Yeah.
The tough stuff. I like stories about the tough stuff.
No, it's great, and I'm laughing because so it made me the most nervous to shoot because I was really sick that day. And we ended up cutting it from the film, which I'm assuming is because I was just like,
You shot a scene while you were really sick?
I was really sick and on some cold medicine. And I think I might have actually fallen asleep up against a microphone stand at one point. Not during shooting, but during a break. We shot here in Brooklyn, so there were some shots down by the water. Those are always challenging days because you really are not in control of your environment. You've got
sound is awful.
Oh my God! You've got wind. You've got boats. You've got. It's funny because as a writer, I was like, you know what? I can write this pretty cheaply, right? We'll be outside and we'll walk and talk and it'll be pretty. They'll be by the water, and then you get to the production part of the thing and you go, what was I thinking about? We've got helicopters flying overhead. We've got pedestrians walking around in a public place, and you're just going, what was I on? What cold medicine did I take? So those scenes are always kind of daunting, but as a director, you work with your DP and your crew, and you try to figure out a way to make that a little bit less painful. So a lot of those are shot in 2 shots rather than trying to get setups and things like that.
Yeah, if you want to write a cheap scene outside, write it in a Kansas farm field or something.
Right, exactly.
Maybe you got wind there, but anything New York
Except
City
for the one day that the hail comes by and just.
Well, anything New York City exterior is going to be really difficult.
For trouble, yeah.
You need kind of a massive crew shutting everything down.
Which is just not. I mean, even when you have that, you're still at the mercy of the city. I mean, the city is an animal unto itself.
You're still at the mercy of a PA going, could you please not walk here? And someone going, no, I'll walk where I want.
Yeah, and they're not saying it like that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
After you how long did it take you to write the script?
So I wrote the first draft fairly quickly, and then I put it away for a little while. Mm-hmm. And then I went back to it when I sort of said, you know what, this is something I really want to do, and I want to go, and I want to make this movie.
How long did it take? How long was it away for?
Let's see, I wrote it over the course of, let's say, 5 months, the first draft. Put it away for, let's say, another 3 or 4 months. So basically over a year, there'd been a first draft. That was 2013, I want to say. And then come, say, 2014, I just kind of said, let's get busy with this. Let's get on it. So I wrote a couple of subsequent drafts that took about 6 months, I'd say.
How much did it change from the first draft?
Pretty substantially, but the core elements of the film were always there. It was always a father-daughter story. The theme was always the theme. The ending was actually always exactly where I wanted to go. But the getting there is a process. There's a section in the film where they correspond via letter that I think is visually is very nice, but also it helps to fast forward their relationship a little bit in terms of the connection that they have and the depth of that connection. And that sequence with the letter writing was one of the very last things I wrote into a final pre-production draft, where I felt like I needed something to sort of propel this story forward in a way that was more interesting visually and was going to be was going to serve the purpose of making people really feel like this relationship moved forward in a truthful way.
Yeah, I liked the way that you had them ping-ponging sort of question and answer via letter. It starts with each one is how they're reading a letter that it's like you can almost hear like the full letter, and then it sort of devolves into like very, very small bites of each letter, which I enjoyed.
Yeah, exactly. To sort of mimic the fast forward of the pace, which we then of course also did with the way we shot it.
Camera starts moving a lot in that montage as well.
Yeah. Hopefully it's not a heavy-handed director move, but you want to try to support what's happening in the story with the visual and with the writing. So it's important to be able to sort of do those two things.
Yeah. And I think in just a minute we're going to be joined by Mr. Wendell Pierce,
Yes.
right, the star of the film. What did before he gets here? Let's talk about him like he's not here.
Let's talk about him some more.
What was it like when you approached him for the movie? How did you pitch it to him?
I'm gonna ask you to hold that question because I want him to tell the story I alluded to.
Come up with another question.
I'm gonna make you come up with another. I'm gonna volley that back to you, only because it's better when he tells the story about receiving the script from Alexa the first time. So I'm gonna gracefully try to just pop that back over to you. But I will say, after he had read it the first time, and this story that you will hear in a moment was communicated or experienced, we got together in LA and just talked about the role, and he, to no surprise of mine, but obviously some relief, he really got it from the get-go. He understood the complexity of where the character had sort of inadvertently and obliviously sort of slid to in his life, and understood that this was a character almost waking up out of a long sort of like, not dark depression, but a long slumber or a long period of being in a routine, which I think we've probably all experienced to some extent or another. And he really got that and really latched onto it as a way into understanding the rest of the character.
Well, let's ask him.
We should.
Let's bring Wendell Pierce out here, the star of One Last Thing. Let's get him out here.
Hey, man.
Wendell Pierce, everybody.
I've got your water over here.
Thank you.
Funk himself.
Sorry I'm late.
That is all right, sir. Thanks so much for joining us. It's an honor to have you. I'm a big fan.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Congratulations on the film. I've bestowed every compliment on it. I'm a bit spent, but it's beautiful. It's a
I've really put him through the ringer for you, so he's going to give you the softball questions.
I'm ready.
Now, this is a very different role for you. I feel like we're very used to seeing you as a detective. You're very great at playing a detective. This is a very warm... But this is a very warm, empathetic person who is almost painfully normal at times. What did you think when you first got the script pitched to you?
Well, Alexa Fogel, our producer, sent the script to me, and I read it. And it just goes to show you how sometimes you can allow other people's ideas about you define you. And I looked at it and I said, Alexa, you didn't need to even send me the script. You could have just told me what day to report. I'm playing the detective, right? Who looks for the girl. She goes, no, we want you to play the lead. And I said, me? I couldn't believe it. And it was a testament to her belief in me, and also recognizing that I've conditioned myself to kind of only be this character actor who plays a supporting role or a secondary role. And so I am indebted to Tim forever and Alexa for thinking of me to play the lead in this. This is the first time I've had a chance to be in a role like this, and I leapt with joy.
Yeah. I got to be honest. I leapt with joy when I recognized, 5 minutes into the movie, that you were the lead, and this is the kind of part that you were playing. Because I think as a fan, you have presence and you have charisma on screen, whether you're a detective or whether you're something like this. So it was so thrilling to see you get the chance to be something different.
And as an actor, you want to have a diverse career. You want to build a body of work, and so I
want to work too.
And you want to work, yes. But what happens sometimes in Hollywood, not sometimes, a lot in Hollywood, people can see you only one way, and it's very good to break out of that, So, one last thing was a great opportunity to do that, because you seldom see images of men of color in this role, in a role like this. So much so that as a man of color, an actor of color, I made the assumption when I got the script that the lead wasn't me. this doctor in search of his daughter. You know, okay, cool. You know, who's that going to be? I mean, a lot of times what happens is Tim said, let's find the actor, and then the specifics of who the actor is will be a part of the role. So I'm really thankful. Publicly, I want to say thank you once again.
You're welcome.
Every time I see him,
I feel like maybe I won out in that deal.
Yeah, no, I went out.
I
won more.
I could see why you would think that. I think so often in a movie like this, if it's a person of color that's leading the film, there would be some kind of, be it for better or worse, sometimes worse, an exploration of stereotypical living situations for
Yes.
people of color in this, rather than just sort of like a regular middle-class man who's searching for his daughter.
His daughter, absolutely. And not to say that who I am specifically shouldn't be taken into account. It brings something to the table, you know. I was telling Tim earlier that I had a friend who was white who saw the film. I showed it to him without his permission. Thank you. And he, for the first time, something landed on him. He said, you know, I never thought about how isolating it might be for you as a black man, or being one of only a few people of color wherever you are. I've always seen Dennis as, you know, I've never thought about, wow, what it must be like for you in that community. And the isolation that may cause. And I said, well, actually, he's not isolated because he was in a community where there's a whole bunch of African-American middle-class folks, you know, but it was something that he hadn't thought of. So, and that was an element that I brought to it that was unspoken. That just the imagery made him think about that. Like, wow, you know.
I think so often
how isolating something can be for a black professional.
Absolutely. I think so often we categorize the humanity of others, you know, be
Yes.
it black, white, or Hispanic, and we need to see different sides, different explorations of everybody rather than sort of the same sort of digging in that we always kind of portray.
Right. It's like that old joke, you know, father and son are in a car accident. The father's killed. The son is rushed to the hospital, brought into the operating room, and the doctor says, I can't operate on him. That's my son. How is that possible? You know, and a long time ago, people would always go, oh, well, you know, the father really wasn't dead, or that was his adoptive father, and he came back. And then it took years before people went, oh, it's his mother. Right? And still, actually, even today, people are like, it's a riddle, you know? What? I'm like, no, it's his mother, you know? So we couldn't see a woman in that role, you know, for a long time. And it's the same here. And it's great. The thing is, humanity speaks to everyone. Mm-hmm. The more specific you are, the more universal your story becomes. And so this story is about family and love. And we all understand both. Whether we choose our family, as we do with friends and lovers, and we all have experienced love in one shape or form. So,
how was it working with Journey?
Fantastic, really fantastic. She's really good. So if you have to be on your game, because you know acting is about creating a world so strong that it induces behavior. And the best acting comes from something that's authentic. And when it's not authentic, it stands out like a sore thumb. It's like a red flag. And she's really good at going, right now, this is fake. This is not authentic. And she keeps you on your P's and Q's.
And she's not afraid to go after it either. You know, this character has a lot of turmoil when he shows up. You know, he's been absent from her life for 25 years, and she wants to know why. Where have you been? And she's not afraid as a character, and Journey's not as an actor, to really get in there and mix it up a little bit. And I think, you know, as Wendell said, it keeps you on your toes, especially if you're coming into it thinking, you know, I'm trying to figure out this for myself, and I'm trying to, you know, be a part of this person's life. You haven't thought about, as that character, you know, what that might be like for the other person, and she comes at you like that. It's powerful stuff, and it makes those scenes really dynamic.
You know, Wendell, I have to ask. You know, you hail from New Orleans, probably my favorite city in the world. I love New Orleans with every fiber of my body. Every time I go, it's just a thrilling.
Great city, the northernmost Caribbean city. Really, when you think about it, it's so Caribbean.
You did you've done an episode with Anthony Bourdain about New Orleans.
Yes.
And I think you've done some work with him outside of that. I'm not sure.
Anthony, we did an episode on No Reservations, and then he asked me to do a roundtable at the end of his first season of Parts Unknown. And then on top of that, he was on the writing staff of Treme, the show I did with HBO. Anthony was someone who could go anywhere at any time and any place and connect with people and really connect into their humanity. He's one of those people that when you were with him, you felt like you were the center of the world because he was so interested and focused on you and whatever we were looking at or eating or whatever. He was able to bring to Treme, one of the first times, any sort of examination in fictionalized television of what it's like in the culinary world. Uniquely a part of our show on Treme. And he was beloved.
And how that culinary world tied into the locale that it was based in.
Yeah, I mean, listen, the culinary world of New Orleans, the musical world of New Orleans, the architecture, all of that is very important, and no one had explored it like that. They actually really had never explored the culinary world in any city like that. And to have a character go between New York and New Orleans, you got a little taste of both of the worlds, and it was because of his, that's what he brought to the show, a real expertise of understanding the world. And it's moments like this where you just wish that that someone who's in pain, he had to be in a great deal of pain, that as much joy and capacity of joy that he had for himself and for others, you wish that in that moment of pain that you could reach out. The act is always impulsive, in the darkest moment. And that impulse is so fast and so impactful when the joy that he brought to so many people was going to far outlast that one moment. And so that's the thing that I try to think about on a day like today.
Absolutely. He introduced people to so many things, be it food, music,
Yes.
movies. Oftentimes his episodes were based off of, when he went to a certain locale, he would base the look off of that, off of a movie. And you could just imagine people hearing him say, oh, Christopher Doyle, Hong Kong, I should go watch these movies by Wong Kar-wai, which could lead someone to watch Jean-Luc Godard. He's a gateway drug for so many things.
Yeah,
and I think
literature, art, just all of that. The reason we make art is the forum where we collectively reflect on this journey, declare what our values are, and then act on them. And he supplied that platform for so many people. I'm telling you, today, most people are thinking about, let me watch these shows and let me go on those journeys that he took us on. I want to go that. I'm going to put all of these places on the list of places that I have to go now. And I think that's the best way that we can honor him and honor his memory.
Absolutely. One more question before we turn to audience Q&A. Treme was a show that was born in the wake of Hurricane Katrina. And a lot of what it said about New Orleans, specifically in the first season, was about what happened in that city during and after the hurricane. And I'm curious, as someone who has always spoken out about the mistakes of that administration, not even the mistakes, I mean the negligence, the horror that they inflicted on the community of New Orleans. What is it like to watch what is happening right now with Puerto Rico and Hurricane Maria?
It is painful to watch. It is, once again, you see the neglect of government, and people are trying to walk on eggshells. But the absolute truth is people of color being neglected by their government because they are people of color. There are people in this country that don't even recognize Puerto Ricans as citizens, and they are citizens. As if we are giving them our tax money when we should be giving them their tax money back, which is they have paid in and deserve the services like any other American. And what is even more glaring is how it was just months after Houston. And you can see a response there, and then weeks after Florida. actually the same storm, I think. Maria then went to Florida, and you see the response there. And then this, all the excuses of, well, it's an island. What does that mean?
Stop giving excuses.
It's not even stop giving excuses. And what happens is it's a painful reminder that we can never let our guards down, that we have to hold people accountable. And I'm hoping that those voices are getting louder so that we can hold this administration accountable and make sure that they bring them the needed resources. We can put the 82nd Airborne anywhere in the world in 48 hours. 48 hours. And we had the same argument when we were in New Orleans. And I'm like, the 82nd Airborne is in Georgia. So it's a hop, skip, and a jump from Georgia to Louisiana, and it's the same for Puerto Rico. We literally just had an airplane crash of Air National Guard from Puerto Rico in Alabama. And yet Puerto Rico still isn't getting the services that they need, and it's not a handout. It's their tax dollars that should be working for them. So it's a stark reminder that we have to fight. This is what institutional racism looks like.
Yes.
Right? People say, well, what is it about? This is why NFL players are kneeling. This is why people are protesting. This is why people are marching. It's not some euphoric idea that's hopefully changing. Racism affects people directly. And as we just discovered, thousands of people lost their lives because of it.
Absolutely. Thank you. I'm glad you talked about that. Who has questions about the movie?
Hi, we're going to take an online question from Whitney. Whitney would like to know, as artists and storytellers, what draws you to a script?
Well, for me as a writer, there's got to be some element of it that it really speaks to me, whether it's thematic or political or social or just something that really is going to want to get me in front of the computer or get me in front of the pad and paper every day to really craft a story. Because in my opinion, to write a script that is worth putting out into the world, you really have to get into it and you really have to examine it from all different angles. And I've got to want to be motivated to do that. So for me, it's about that.
And for me, it's something that will challenge me. I always want to be challenged. Something that's authentic. Also something that's enlightening. And that's across the board. A lot of times people ask, well, which do you prefer, theater or film? And I say, well, it's always the writing. Good writing is the key. And so those stories really that challenge me as an actor, meaning that I'm going to have to go through an emotional journey, that I'm going to kind of explore some parts of myself that I may learn something from. That's the thing that really attracts me to a script.
Thank you.
One more? Right here.
Hi. I was wondering, throughout the duration of filming this movie, what was your favorite moment on set?
What was your favorite moment on set, Wendell?
My favorite moment on set?
Good question.
That is a tough question. There was about a 20-foot putt I made. Right?
And it was caught on
and
camera?
he promised.
It's
yes.
it's in the movie. It's
in the
it's
movie.
a wide shot, beautiful background. Wendell alone on the golf course, and he drains. I think you're being modest. I think it was more like 30 feet. It was
like
a long.
It was a long putt.
Was he supposed to drain it?
Yeah.
How many
Yeah.
times did it take?
More than one. But,
Yeah, more than yes.
but actually,
I
not
heard
that.
we're losing the light. We're losing the light, Wendell.
The best part about that was I was in it's a very wide shot. I was just off camera behind him, and we'd been talking about which way we thought the putt went, and I said, just go ahead and go right at it.
Yeah.
And he goes right at it. He nails it, and you have to remember you're on camera, so he can't jump up and down and celebrate because he's playing a guy who shoots 67 on a golf course all the time.
Right,
It's
right.
got to be like business as usual. So I'm going and just walk up like nothing happened, and just go pick up the ball.
Yeah.
And inside we're both going,
oh man, God, I can't believe that's on film. That was a great moment. Also, there was a moment with both of the ladies. With the one particular scene that I did with Joanne, that she said, "Wow, this is my first American movie." She said, "If this is the way it's going to start, it's going to be great," you know. It was like a real great compliment to be in the scene. She said, "This is great. This is a great way to start my American film career. I'm enjoying the scene." And then Journey and I had just a wonderful moment. It would happen over and over and over. It always, and then with Tim, I felt like I'm always apologizing to Tim. Like, I hope I did you right. To put together a film, to write it, direct it, and produce it, you are giving your all. And he worked years on this, and it's not an incidental thing. And so when someone entrusts you with their life's work like that, it's a great responsibility that you have. And it's about the work that you do and the people that you meet that will long outlast anything else. And on this, it was great work and great people. And that's the greatest moment I have on this film.
On that note, how can people see the film?
So next Wednesday, June 13th.
June 13th.
June 13th. You can go to fathomevents.com and find it in your neighborhood. Also, Fandango, your usual, wherever you like to purchase your tickets. And then also, we're going to be on VOD on June 15th, Friday. So if you don't have a chance to see it in the theaters, you can catch it.
But
however.
do it on June 13th.
See it on the big screen.
See it on the big screen. You know how you.
And then watch it at home.
That one event that you have to do. Let me tell you, how many times have you missed out on seeing that wonderful film on the big screen in the movie theater with your popcorn, and you're looking on your little 45-inch wide. Well, okay, most of you guys may have a 100-inch sitting in the den somewhere. Still, that cannot compare to the experience in the theater. So know that around this country, most of my family somewhere will be in one of those theaters. And I'm going to be in one of them too. And please come out June 13th, this one night, and see one last thing.
Everybody, please give it up for Wendell and Tim. Let's hear it.